The Joe Rogan experience has become a cultural phenomenon, captivating millions of listeners worldwide. What started as a simple podcast has grown into a massive platform that influences public opinion on a wide range of topics. Boasting millions of listeners, the show has an undeniable influence on a vast audience. From comedy to politics, health to conspiracy theories, Rogan's show covers it all, attracting a diverse and dedicated following. Rogan's casual, long-form interview style has resonated with listeners, creating a sense of intimacy and authenticity. His ability to engage in deep, unfiltered conversations with a wide array of guests has set his podcast apart from traditional media formats. This has allowed him to cultivate a dedicated fan base that trusts his perspective and opinions. Fans feel a personal connection to Rogan, often viewing him as a trusted friend rather than just a media personality. However, this trust has also raised concerns about the potential for his platform to be used to spread misinformation and harmful ideologies. The unfiltered nature of the show means that controversial and unverified claims can be presented without challenge. With great power comes great responsibility, and the sheer scale of Rogan's reach makes it crucial to examine the content and potential impact of his show. The influence he wields can shape public discourse and sway opinions on critical issues. The open forum nature of the podcast, while seemingly promoting free-flowing conversation, can also create an environment where unsubstantiated claims and dangerous rhetoric can flourish unchecked. This lack of moderation can lead to the spread of false information. This is particularly concerning given the diversity of Rogan's audience, many of whom may not have the critical thinking skills or background knowledge to discern fact from fiction. The potential for misinformation to take root in such a varied audience is significant. The lack of editorial oversight on Rogan's podcast, while appealing to some, further exacerbates the potential for harm. Without a team to fact-check or provide balance, the responsibility falls solely on Rogan and his guests. Unlike traditional media outlets, which are bound by journalistic ethics and fact-checking standards, Rogan operates independently. This independence allows for a broader range of topics and opinions, but also removes the safety net of editorial scrutiny. This allows him to present information without the same level of scrutiny or accountability, potentially exposing his audience to inaccurate, misleading, or even dangerous content. The impact of such content can be far-reaching and difficult to mitigate. The rise of Rogan's podcast highlights the evolving landscape of media consumption and the challenges posed by unmoderated platforms. As more people turn to independent media for information, the lines between fact and opinion become increasingly blurred. As traditional gatekeepers of information lose their grip, individuals like Rogan have emerged as powerful influencers, shaping public opinion and discourse on a wide range of issues. This shift has democratized media but also introduced new risks. While this shift presents opportunities for diverse perspectives and challenging established narratives, it also demands a critical examination of the responsibility that comes with such influence. The power to shape minds and opinions is immense, and with it comes the need for careful consideration and ethical responsibility. Joe Rogan's podcast, with its massive reach and millions of dedicated listeners, has become a significant cultural force in the media landscape. Its informal format, which often feels more like a casual conversation than a traditional interview, has become a breeding ground for disinformation. The show's conversational style, while seemingly innocuous and engaging, often allows misleading or outright false information to be presented without proper context or challenge. This can be particularly problematic when complex topics are discussed in a simplified manner, leading to misunderstandings. This lack of rigorous fact-checking creates an environment where conspiracy theories, pseudoscience, and harmful narratives can flourish unchecked. The casual nature of the discussions can make these ideas seem more palatable and less dangerous than they actually are. One of the most concerning aspects of Rogan's podcast is its tendency to platform individuals with a history of spreading misinformation. These guests often bring controversial and unverified claims to the table. These guests, often with fringe views or questionable credentials, are given a platform to present their claims to a vast audience without being held accountable for their accuracy. This can lead to the normalization of fringe ideas and the erosion of trust in credible sources. This lack of scrutiny can lend legitimacy to these claims, making them appear more credible to Rogan's listeners. When listeners hear these ideas presented in a seemingly authoritative manner, they may be more inclined to accept them as truth. The spread of disinformation on Rogan's podcast is further exacerbated by the show's echo chamber effect. This phenomenon occurs when listeners are repeatedly exposed to the same ideas, reinforcing their existing beliefs. Rogan's audience, largely composed of individuals who already share his worldview, may be more likely to accept information presented on the show without question. This can create a closed loop where only certain perspectives are validated. This confirmation bias can create a feedback loop, reinforcing existing beliefs and making it difficult for listeners to engage with alternative viewpoints or challenge inaccurate information. Over time, this can lead to a more polarized and less informed audience. The casual and conversational nature of Rogan's interviews can also contribute to the spread of misinformation. The relaxed atmosphere can make it easier for guests to present their views without fear of rigorous questioning. Statements made in passing or presented as personal opinions can easily be misconstrued as factual information by listeners. This is especially true when complex issues are boiled down to sound bites. Without clear disclaimers or fact checks, these misleading statements can quickly gain traction and spread beyond the confines of the podcast. Social media can amplify these messages, reaching an even larger audience. The lack of accountability for false or misleading information presented on the show further exacerbates this problem. Without mechanisms to correct or challenge these inaccuracies, the spread of misinformation can have serious consequences for public understanding and discourse. The COVID-19 pandemic brought the issue of misinformation to the forefront, highlighting how quickly false information can spread and the potential dangers it poses to public health. Joe Rogan's podcast, one of the most popular in the world, became a significant platform for the spread of harmful and misleading claims about the virus. With millions of listeners tuning in, the impact of the information shared on his show cannot be underestimated. Rogan, often skeptical of mainstream narratives, used his show to platform doctors and scientists with fringe views, amplifying their voices and lending them an air of legitimacy. This approach, while appealing to those who distrust conventional sources, can be incredibly dangerous when it comes to public health. This gave rise to a dangerous ecosystem of misinformation, potentially jeopardizing public health efforts. Hospitals were overwhelmed, healthcare workers were stretched thin, and the spread of false information only made their jobs harder. One of the most egregious examples of COVID-19 misinformation spread on Rogan's podcast was the promotion of ivermectin as a treatment for the virus. Despite numerous studies and health experts debunking its efficacy, the drug was touted as a miracle cure. Despite a lack of scientific evidence to support its efficacy, Rogan repeatedly touted the drug, even claiming he had used it himself to recover from COVID-19. This personal endorsement added a layer of credibility that many listeners found convincing. This endorsement, amplified by his massive platform, led to a surge in demand for ivermectin, causing shortages of the drug for those who actually needed it for its intended purposes. Pharmacies struggled to keep up with the demand, and those who required the medication for legitimate health issues were left without. Beyond specific treatments, Rogan's podcast also provided a platform for downplaying the severity of the pandemic. This skepticism towards the seriousness of COVID-19 led many to ignore public health guidelines, further exacerbating the spread of the virus. Rogan and his guests frequently questioned the efficacy of vaccines, despite overwhelming evidence supporting their role in preventing severe illness and death. This skepticism contributed to vaccine hesitancy, a major hurdle in achieving herd immunity. Additionally, the podcast often promoted conspiracy theories about the virus's origins, suggesting it was a man-made bioweapon or part of a larger global plot. These unfounded claims sowed further distrust and confusion among the public. These narratives, often presented without challenge or context, contributed to vaccine hesitancy, fueled distrust in public health institutions, and potentially prolonged the pandemic. The consequences of such misinformation are far-reaching and can undermine efforts to control the virus. The spread of COVID-19 misinformation on Rogan's podcast highlights the real-world consequences of unchecked claims made on influential platforms. The ripple effects of such misinformation can be felt across communities and healthcare systems. The casual dismissal of expert consensus and the amplification of fringe voices can have a tangible impact on public health, particularly during a global crisis. It is crucial for influential figures to recognize the weight of their words and the responsibility that comes with their platform. This underscores the need for greater accountability and responsibility from platforms like Rogan's in curbing the spread of potentially harmful misinformation. As we navigate future public health challenges, the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic must guide our approach to information sharing and media consumption.